I can answer that one. You seem to have established a really nice way.
Where were you on the night of the 15th?
Okay, Andre, are you ready?
I'm just letting
Okay.
Yeah.
You just tell. I'm going to so long start this one. I mean,
That's on. That's on. It's on. Have a look. Does it say record on the thing? Or not?
makes
No.
a red dot there.
Yeah, you'll see. You'll see
There
the
you
word
go.
record.
And there's also, no, it's only making a,
There. Record.
yeah, but it's only a red dot.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine, because there's also
Yes.
the red light going
Yeah.
on there.
Whenever I see a red light, I have to remember. You can't go in there. You're a married man.
Yeah.
right if you're ready.
Okay, you can go.
The sun's coming.
Yeah. Okay.
We're sitting here on the porch of Jamie and Shirley Watkiss of Westbul Bull Terrier fame, one of the oldest established kennels in Australia. The home is on the canals at Mandurah, south of Perth in Western Australia, and it's a lovely winter's morning, and we're interviewing Jamie, asking him to tell us a little about himself.
And basically, I was London born, lived a lot of years in New Zealand, chose to come and live in Australia, where I met Shirley. We've had our 3 children. We've run quite a number of successful businesses over the years, but mainly I was a full-time entertainer, doing everything varying from old rock and roll, country, funk, jazz, played a variety of instruments, sang, and ended up doing a bit of comedy for the last 8 or 10 years of my life, and just a few other things. And basically now we're retired and enjoy our dogs and our grandchildren. We've had 3 kennels in 3 different shires, and one became a boarding kennel, and that's basically it. We're now retired and still riding shotgun on the club as president and secretary, I guess.
How long have you been involved?
I was given a beautiful brindle bull terrier cross, and when I say a cross, she was very, very close. I think her mother was a full bully bitch, and the father was a almost bull terrier, but there was a New Zealand pig dog, and it was very common over there. Young men all went hunting pigs. It was one of those things, and I found her to be absolutely wonderful, dedicated and protective, and great on a hunt. She was great on possums and rabbits and you name it. She was very good. I was about 7 years old, so that's a long time. I was taken pig hunting with a purebred little red bitch. It was 40 pound, and she could stop a big boar, no trouble at all, owned by a big Maori guy that was a supervisor. Very tall, skinny Maori gentleman that was very well educated, and he introduced me to pig hunting with a spear he used to use. She was non-registered but a purebred bully. And then when I came to Australia, I always said I wanted to have one, and took a while to convince Shirley to have one of those ugly looking things in the house. And in 1973 we purchased our first pedigree bull terrier. We were with the people that formed the club. A group of us got together and formed the club. So 1973 it got serious.
And what made you decide to breed and show?
I guess it's a good answer there. If you've got a good bank account and you want to get rid of it, get into showing and breeding dogs. You can get rid of the money. I just felt that that if one was going to own a pedigree bull terrier and be involved with it, and naturally we had not been involved in the show scene, you get the dog and you decide we'd like to breed it, as most pet owners do. And rather than just doing it the way it would have been done, I did a bit of research. I guess it's just something inherent in my makeup. I wanted to do it correctly. We then found a very, very good top quality sire for that bitch. Then I bought a son of Kawari of Guillaume from Dave Bewley. He became a champion, unbeaten in his career. But when I analysed his make and shape, I realised he was no good. So the deciding to show and breed was a desire to breed good animals, and each month I learnt more about just how bad our dogs were here in Australia, and decided to import from England.
And how did you come up with the kennel name Westbul?
We analysed it, and you know, like the anagrams, the Ormandy for Raymond, and like a Lanieg for old Les Greenall, and No Sealg for Gleason, and I thought, well, it doesn't really tell people too much. I once worked for a chap that was selling forklifts, and he called the company Mechanical Advantage Proprietary Limited, which is the principle of using a crowbar to lift something gives you a mechanical advantage. And I said, I'm sure that some old uneducated market gardener buying a forklift is going to understand what the hell Mechanical Advantage Proprietary Limited does. So I thought, why don't we say what we're doing and where we're doing it? And it was quite simple. We're in West Australia, Bull Terriers. Simple.
Good.
Westbul.
Now, did somebody influence you and help you on your way? Did you have a mentor? Are there any people who looked after you in the beginning?
The people we followed on, they're legion. Dear old Helen Glaspie was from the Rickmay Kennels in England, was living here. She was very helpful. I was most fortunate to visit Raymond and have a lot of material from Raymond, which was influential. I read his books. The man that taught me the most about conformation was Les Greenall, a chap in Victoria who's now, I guess, 70 years old. Was very much a construction man and explained to me the difference between just having a dog with a head and having a dog with great conformation, and that in the early days of the breed in this country, if it had a good head, the rest of it could look like Quasimodo, and it was made wonderful. Les explained there is more to the dog than the head. And yeah, and lovely old people that taught us all the things about the health problems and so forth. There are many, but I guess Raymond was the biggest influence.
Do you line breed, outcross? Do you inbreeding? How do you manage your breeding program?
The litter that produced Westbul Rolling Stone was grandson, grandmother. So yes, we line breed. And I'll admit this, that the first litter we ever had, that all whelped unaided, got themselves out of the bag unaided, the bitch cleaned them up unaided. We just did an experiment and lived perfectly healthy lives, all 8 of them, with a full brother-sister mating. We actually mated a dog to his sister because they were conformationally so complementary, it was quite scary. I've never let a pedigree stop a mating. I'll place the 2 animals together. If this boy's got the head, neck, front, and is a bit weak behind, the bitch needs a bit more head, length, layback, she's got the wonderful rear end, that's the mating. If I pick up the pedigree and there's nothing in that excites me, it's only a minus. It does not stop the mating. Yeah, that's it. So I'm not a paper mater. I'm an actual animal mater.
But you do line breed?
We do line breed.
And you do outcross at times as well?
Oh, we've just done that. We've just done complete outcrosses. Just to, well, as a judge, you're most fortunate. You go around the world and say you're getting a few flat feet in your kennels and you suddenly judge somewhere. And someone has a wonderful young dog with his cracking cat feet, there's the bonus. So yes, you pull it in to get the virtue that someone else has, which you don't.
Which brings us to a few things I've noticed here in Western Australia that I don't notice regularly in other parts of the world. I've noticed your dogs have beautiful tight feet all around. Very straight fronts with very few bowed fronts. And I've also noticed you, one of the few countries where I've seen black noses. We have now, it seems to be a problem here. It seems to be a...
It's all right.
All right.
Don't worry about that one.
Don't worry.
That.
Just carry on.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, she's playing out with this.
Yeah, something that's not noisy. Give her a little rubber tie.
Yeah.
This way. Jimmy Pena in Paris gave me that, and he said, if your dog can eat it, I'll give you 10 of them. Yeah, that's too noisy. Try on that one.
Okay, I'm just gonna carry on with that.
Yeah.
And just see where we were. Pick us up again. Are you going to leave it there, rephrase, or are we going to pick up again?
let's
You
see.
go back to the...
Just to the question. And then kick in again.
Let's just see. I'll touch it again.
I think you should throw your inside shirt. That'd be a good idea. Still a puppy's a puppy.
Yeah.
It's part of being bull terriers.
Let's see.
That bit of whining doesn't really matter.
No.
That's the atmosphere. It's just the
Yeah.
chewing sound that's under
Yeah.
it.
Are you right?
I'm rather going to ask you, I'm not going to repeat this question now, I'm going to ask you later on. Are there any features that you think that the Western Australian dogs differ from us?
Yeah, there is a question in there,
Is there
about what would people look for if they were looking at your line.
Oh yeah, I'm coming to that now, it's the next question. It ends with this thing about line breeding and inbreeding.
Just wanna.
Is that one still running?
Yeah.
Have you got unlimited
I might,
time?
yeah, I'm just thinking I might kill that.
Okay,
There we
that
go.
one is good. Okay.
Would you say you've established a recognizable line? And do you think others would be able to recognize your dogs if they saw them anyway in Australia?
Yeah, I think we, in the late 80s and through the early 90s, it had become quite obvious that a Westbul dog or animals sired by Westbul dogs would walk into a ring and you could actually hear comments where people would say that's obviously a Westbul or it's sired by a Westbul. And one young chap from the Noosa used to use it as an adjective. He said, "My new pups look so Westbul." and it did. It got to a stage where we tried for very short backs, good angulation in the rear, long necks, long forefaces, and a lovely curving top line. I always abhorred where a dog comes down completely straight in the neck, a coffee table back, tail in the air and so forth with the big shelf like a Basenji behind. Whereas to me, a continuous flowing curve right over the dog, to me, where the neck blends into the withers and then it flows over, the slight roach over the loins. Some people call it an overdone roach, but I don't know, it feels like it's a beautiful symmetrical animal if it's got that rather than the hard, angular coffee table back.
Size and bone?
Yeah, we have been accused of having some rather larger dogs over the years, but I just liked, it's bred to be a fighting animal, and in the Foxy standard they're saying the Foxy shall not be so cloddy as to not be able to follow a fox through a drain. In other words, if he's too big to quickly run through a 12-inch drain, he can't do his job. And although I have many times given the CC to a very small terrier type 30-pound dog, one only has to say what would happen if Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson met in the ring. We're talking about range, reach, size, and that old story of it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's a nice sentiment, but really a very, very large animal, though we would never ever revert to what they were bred for. The very large animal you know is going to be the one that's capable, and especially a long neck. And I'll just take this a little further, and I've explained this to a few people. I have judged dogs that were so cobby and short in neck that if a dog grabbed them on the third rib, not only, unlike some of our, as say Westbul Rolling Stone, who had that lovely long stallion arch neck, he could have just reached around and grabbed the dog on the back of the neck and saved his own life. I've seen dogs that could not look around to see what breed was biting them. Their neck is so stuffy. It really is an important part of the dog, is that lovely elegance and reach. And I don't mean skinny, big dogs with the power to match. I like that. It's just my preference. Many times I've given challenge to small dogs.
Which one would you regard as your most successful bull terrier?
I wouldn't be able to put an opinion on it because it's cut and dried. Westbul Rolling Stone was the first dog to ever win the Biennial Trophy Show back-to-back. His son won it back-to-back, and sons after that. And most times when people used him at stud, they just got ROMs and champions and very successful show dogs in their litters. He was the most successful in the show ring. He was. Yeah.
All right, so which bull terrier would you regard as the best ever bred in your country? And also tell us about which one in the world you think is the best in
The best bull terrier I've physically had my hands on was Rolling Stone's father, was Westbul Citizen Joe. Until he was older, he never was a great showman. But I've actually said in my standard that I wrote in the second book, he was almost the living, breathing standard. Had he had an inch out of his back and a slightly meaner, varminty eye, he would have been the standard personified, and that's as close as I've seen. But he was never a great showman. He just was quite shy when he was younger, yet he came out at 8, 9 and 10 years old, under specialists at a specialties, and he went best exhibit at 8, best exhibit at 9, and runner up to his grandson at 10. And I don't think that has been done in history. He still looks great at almost 14 when he was finally euthanized because he was going blind and incontinent and so forth. It was the best. But he was only marginally. I have seen many, many great dogs, and and all around the world. There was a dog on the east coast called Vangelis Driven Thunder. It was a great dog. I missed Bar Sinister live by about a couple of weeks, but I was fortunate enough at Raymond's to handle Concord and Sunny and Sunstar and Scrumptious. And Abraxas Aristo was in the backyard. He was a darn good dog. It's very hard. There have been great dogs all around. I think Bill Morgan, for a little guy from Wales that didn't have the money and the proximity that the other English had. Some of the Maori dogs were great dogs. You know, there's just been great dogs all over. It's hard to do it. And when I say Citizen Joe, he only marginally was better than some of those great dogs I've seen in handle. It's very hard.
Mm-hmm. Obviously you still show.
Yes.
Do you handle yourself?
Yes, yes. Try not to, but... Yeah.
What do you do to condition your bull terriers?
I think just natural feeding. We have a butcher who just clears his shelves at night of all the meat and minces it and promises us faithfully, and we know there's no preservative because it'll go brown within 5 or 6 hours of it coming home. We have a good normal meat mince. We use a normal kibble. We have used the designer kibbles, and we had a couple of litters with very bent fronts, bordering on rickets, and our young vet, whose clinic actually advocated some of these designer foods, and they say don't give them anything else, he said do not do that ever again, just go back to your natural feeding. And the Australian vet, Ian Billinghurst, has written those books, Give the Dog a Bone and so forth. If you read those books and you go back to natural feeding, the dogs just seem to blossom, they become big, strong. We're not getting the bent fronts, fortunate or planned, I don't know, but luckily we're not getting those at the moment. We're not getting the health problems. I mean, years ago, yes, we had some heart murmur problems and so forth. But I think the natural feeding is a very, very important thing, and just a good walk, exercise, and freedom to run. You know.
What kind of exercise?
Guilty, not enough. What's the old saying? If your dog's too fat, you're not getting enough exercise. No, we really should do more and so forth. But I mean, when we had the kennels, we had acres and acres. One of our properties was 160 acres. The dogs could run for hours and chase us on the horses or whatever they wanted to do, the second kennels. The third kennels was 10 acres, and we had, our puppy runs were 60 feet long, of a combination of concrete for the first 20 feet and grass for 40. Then we had house paddocks, and I've shown people videos of 14 together running in a paddock. And all the whites come in grey because they've been digging and rolling in the sand and having fun. I just think free and natural, big properties. And I feel so sorry for people in the countries where you can only have a very tiny backyard. You then got to put your coat on and walk your dog for miles. And that natural, in the sun, Australian exercise, the natural vitamin D and calcium development of Aussie dogs in the sun, it just seems to help them their development. So the exercise off the lead free is good, but you can't do it in public. It's against the law. You know?
How big is your kennel now?
about 100 square miles. We now live on the canals, semi-retired. We have Millie here, we have our one bitch here. We have a bitch coming in the next few days to whelp. And what it is basically, we have lovely amicable arrangements with lots of the nice young kids in the club. They get the dog, they virtually have a free dog. And we have access to it if we choose. And out of, say, over 4 years, if we placed 30 animals on breeding rights, we would use 2 of them. We have a very high cut-off point, and there's no point breeding from the 5th best. It's got to be the top 2. So our kennel is very big. We drive about 100 miles to get from one end of the run to the other because some of them live the other side of Perth. It's a wonderful arrangement, and having had kennels, no matter how much love you try and give them, it's not the same as sitting on the couch watching TV with mum and pinching her scones and trying to drink a cup of tea. The family life we've found is much, much better. I would never ever go back to what I call the chicken hut syndrome. I realise now that basically we did the breeding injustice by locking those dogs up. Even though it was acres of room, they're still not in a family. Never do it again.
What are you showing at the moment?
We've got some exciting young ones coming through. We have a dog called Westbul, Ezzy, who in his first 4 shows went best exhibit under 4 specialists. Westbul Charlie boy, he came out for 1 show and was fortunate enough to take a best exhibit under Eric Stanley. And unfortunately he had an operation on his head to remove a head hematoma, ruined his ears, and I realised he's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Quite a well-made dog. And his mother Millie, she got reserved to a very fine dog in Sydney, got the challenge in Melbourne, won the national in Brisbane beating all the males, came back here and came out of retirement at 4 years old and went run up to her son last year in the show. So Millie's been a pot of gold for us. She's sort of like, since Chelsea, Chelsea was our Abraxas Athenia. Athenia was very good to Violet, Chelsea was good to us, and Millie's now becoming that again. There's some lovely stuff coming down from her. Yeah.
Jamie, you judge all over the world. What common faults do you see in bull terriers worldwide today?
I think the peak of quality would have been the show that Eric Stanley judged in Melbourne in 1991, where there were a great number of animals with long necks, long forefaces, short backs, 4 chests, stifles. Any one of 10 dogs in that show could have been a best exhibit in another time in another country. As I've been going around the world, and I've said this at after show functions, that we're seeing short forefaces, very short forefaces. The foreface must be a 3-2. Just go back to the old Tom Horner idea of the bull terrier, 3-2. And most bull terriers these days, the eye would be equidistant, occiput to eye to nose, and often in front of the equidistant, where the muzzle should be a 3-2 to the skull. We're getting short forefaces, short upper arms, very long backs, and low to the ground. They're getting lower and lower to the ground. And I remember talking to Bill Lambert on the phone and saying, if you find a dog with a great upper arm at any of his shows, please buy it for me and I'll just send you the money. And Bill said, if I find one, you won't get it. I'll keep it. He said, if I find one. That was his terminology, if I find one. And really, they're becoming very rare. So we're getting low to the ground, short upper arms, long backs, shorter necks, and very short forefaces. And when I'm upset about the forefaces, I recently showed a dog, and a judge said to me, your dog's face is too long. And it's actually, if you measure it, exactly right. It was just longer than its contemporaries in the show. James Hinks knew that the old bull-faced breed could actually only bite, say, halfway through a limb because of its short foreface. The dog could then pull the limb and get it out. James Hinks knew that by breeding a longer foreface, the canines would lock exactly on the far side of the limb, and after that it was good night, O-ring. That dog wasn't going to get away. And the standard of the head, go back and read it, says, the head of the bull terrier shall be, what's the first adjective? Long. All the strong and arc and powerful and everything else comes after that. It wasn't put first to be considered last. And unfortunately, people are now saying, but it's all right compared to that dog. So it's most important that we stop comparing against our contemporaries and go back and compare against the standard.
Would you say the worldwide problem of in-standing canines would you say that could improve if we went back to that kind, or changed our head slightly as you now advocated?
Yeah, and it is. We all know it is really a serious problem. We've done matings recently from 2 animals with perfect mouths, and there'll be a couple in that litter that've got the instanding canines, and some of them are so, not necessarily ours, but I've judged some dogs that are so instanding they're no longer an irritation to the dog, because when they're only slightly instanding they irritate the gum. When they're right in, they don't even reach the palate, and therefore they're waving around in mid-air and not giving the dog any discomfort. They've gone to the other extreme. At the recent show in Adelaide, I happened to say to some people, if we don't address this problem now, in 5 years' time we won't have a male to use to try and correct the problem. And we've just gone to Queensland to a dog with a great bite to try and fix it. It is a serious problem. I'm hoping by breeding the longer forefaces and getting it back to the standard, we can do that. You know, people have bred more and more arc and getting it over, and because we've done that, it's an age-old thing. You're breeding the arc and that brings the bones round, the jaw comes back in a little bit to compensate. Now when you shorten anything in nature, not only does it shorten, it narrows. It must narrow. You can't ask a crocodile to grow a slightly shorter tail without it narrowing. So when you ask the bull terrier to grow a shorter jaw to get the scissor bite, it goes shorter and narrower, and we're getting this problem. And I believe it's very serious. Yeah.
You seem to have the blackest noses I've seen in a hell of a long time all over the world. Would you say that, why would you say Western Australia has blacker noses and tighter feet, I've also noticed, than other parts of the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can honestly say that Shirley and myself have not consciously bred to blacken the noses. But sitting here now, I have a hard time remembering the last time we had a Dudley nose. It's just, it may be just good fortune, but we do like colour-bred white matings. I think they're very, very good. But no, the tight feet, yes, we've bred for. There's no two ways about it. We had a period in Westbul Kennels where I have one dog that has all his ROM qualifications. I won't name the dog, but we never ever applied. He was a multiple in-show winner. And we never applied for his ROM because I felt that a dog that could walk across snow should not have his ROM. He didn't have cat feet. So that dog we never applied. But the feet we bred for, but the noses, I think we've just been lucky, it's just come.
How would you say we could fix the white nose problem in the rest of the world? Why do you use more colour in your dog's ear, or where does the fault lie with us?
Yeah, it is a bit of a hard one, because when I've judged, like America and England and France recently and so forth, that there are actually coloured dogs with Dudley noses, and that's starting to get scary. I mean, on a white, you can understand it. I just think people need to address the problem. Once again, it's an aesthetic fault, but it's like the Frisian cow syndrome, and as Brian Hill has avowed, there's a pied gene. Now, whether that can be proven or not, I don't know, but I can tell you this, that in Australia there have been some lovely dominant conformational animals with terrible mismarks on them, and for generations after, there's all these dogs coming in the ring with the map of China in the middle of their back. It's just one of those things. It's not going to stop the dog doing what it was bred to do. It can still fight, but it's just not nice. If you can see that lovely brindle with the collar and solid all the way back, it helps. Same with the whites. We recently had a little puppy that had a great big brindle patch from her backside, looked like she'd messed herself. But rather than hide it, we put a frame around her. Her name is Westbul Blotchy Bum. So, there's nothing you can do. And yet her pigment around her lips and everything is wonderful. And you see some of the ones we've got here. People have commented that a lot of our animals here had the real black lipstick, the black eyeliner, and it's there. Yes, we do use a lot of colour-bred whites. I don't like going white to white to white too many times. There was a kennel in England that did that, and I saw the results of it, and they were getting almost albinism introduced many years ago.
Jamie, you mentioned earlier that there weren't very serious health problems. Do you believe in health testing, and why would you think you are freer of the problems that other parts of the world are? other parts of the world?
Oh, you must health test. Nothing that we have had control over has been mated without going over the pits, as we call it, like you take your car over to get it checked. Everything now that is used is fully health tested for. There is no Bayer facility in Western Australia, but fortunately, really, I can't remember the last deaf animal bred in Western Australia. But you know, we take them up there. They are. I believe some of the Americans and English just use a urine test for nephritis. Well, sorry, ours do the full blood test. They are ultra shaved and ultrasounded. In fact, one of the judges from South Australia put up one of our bitches and commented on the great big bald patches on the side. She'd been ultrasounded a month before. We ultrasound for that. The hearts are checked, patellas, hips, the whole bit before they are mated. And that was, I guess, brought about by the fact that, you know, one of our most famous show dogs from Westbul Rolling Stone was a very, very strong and healthy dog. Up to a certain point, we suddenly found he had polycystic kidneys. He had two in one kidney and one in the other. And then that transmitted through. As far as I'm concerned, the jury's still out on the mode of inheritance because both of his parents were tested at the university over a 48-hour period. We left them there for them to test him. And neither of those animals had any functional problems. Westbul, Chelsea and Citizen Joe were put down. They never died at, I think, 13 and 14 years old and had no faults, and I have the documentation. So the professor could only feel that Rolly inherited it through a genetic mutation. Had we used an organophosphate to keep mozzies off the wall while Chelsea was in the first few stages of gestation, he said that they really could not come up with why it happened, but it was obvious that he could transmit it. And that did not kill him. His heart took him out when he was about 7 years old. So when you have something as great as him, and then you have to stop breeding from and you lose him young, because of that problem, we are now fanatical about health testing because we don't want to have that heartache again.
So, right, so if a young breeder or a young enthusiast came to you and asked your advice how to start a kennel, what would you give him? Or her?
Never bother with a dog. To feed something 365 days a year that you might use for a total of 2 hours in that year at stud work. Get all your dogs away to private homes where they're looked after well. Make sure they're in good, secure homes, if you can possibly do it. And get yourself a very good foundation bitch and never let money be the criteria. Stop having steak dinners, give up smoking, don't go out to anywhere. Save that money, and if you have to, whatever you do, get a very good foundation bitch. Make sure she has a darn good bite, and I've put up undershot dogs at shows because it was so good elsewhere I couldn't not do it. But try, if you're starting a line, try and get the good bites, get good solid colour if you can, all those things, the long foreface, the lovely long neck, nice small erect ears, good feet, the whole thing, and try and do some research behind her. Don't get sucked in by a hybrid. You get people come into the breed, they get an average bitch, they put it to a cracking dog, and all of a sudden you'll see a bitch in that litter that's a hybrid. She looks great, but does not have the genetic ability to reproduce herself. So when you buy your bitch, you want her to have a great mum, a great grandma. And if you can go back and get a line, something from a line that are crackers, you're giving yourself a winning edge. You're dealing yourself 4 aces in the card game.
Have you ever had other breeds? Do you judge other breeds? Do you like other breeds?
I've never had another breed and I'll never own another breed.
Why not?
Right. I don't know. It's just that I found the Bull Terrier to be the most amazing with children, but I judge all the hounds and all the terriers, and that only happened because in Western Australia, when I wished to become a judge, there was no facility here in our canine control to be a specialist judge. The rules were if you wanted to judge Bull Terriers, you had to do the Terrier group. And I once had someone say, oh, you're only an all-breeds judge. I said, that's only because of necessity. If I wished to judge the breed, I had to go ahead and do it. And I then thought, well, if I add another group to it, at least if another country wants to take me over to do a show, they can sell me off to an all-breeds club. And I had 2 groups. And the politics and the garbage one has to go to become an all-breeds judge in Australia and the subservient forelock touching you have to do to get there, I just said, look, I'll stick with those two and good night, because it really is a cartel. But when I judge the hounds, I very much like Rhodesian Ridgebacks. I think Border Terriers, for an average suburban family, a Border Terrier is a great little character. They're very stoic and very brave, and for courage, your little crazy Scotchman. I mean, you see the Scotties and the Westies standing up looking at a Rottweiler saying, I can take you out without a problem. No one tells them the size they are. You know, there are some great breeds, but for me, it's the one and only, and I really have a problem understanding how people can say I have, you know, Bull Terriers, German Shepherds and East Mongolian Snaffleburgers. I just don't understand how you can do that. Yeah. One love.
And a final question. Is there anything else? Anything you would like to share with the readers of this book?
Anything we'd like to share? Never let a Bull Terrier do anything early in its life that you don't want to carry on. Do not put a pair of old sneakers out the back for it to chew, and then mother comes home from a nightclub with a few wines in a few weeks later and kicks her shoes off at the door and goes outside and finds that that thing that tasted like salt and smelled like mum's feet, the same as the other one she gave me, is now spread all over the lawn. It just happened to cost $500. So don't let them do things you don't want them to do. Never play tug of war with a dog. We almost had a child killed on a property. We were given a beautiful pit bull, and he was a genuine pedigree American pit bull. And the young chap read Shirley's article on the prenatal and whelping, which a lot of people have used as a guide when they're, and saved a lot of puppies and a lot of bitches, a lot of discomfort. He gave us this because he'd read the article and saved his whole litter. He said, your Bull Terriers are no good for guarding themselves against theft. Have this running around at night and you'll be right. And he was a wonderful dog, but I let a young man come in on work experience, and he played with a towel with the dog, playing tug of war. So that dog, who was named Loki, I think is the Viking god of destruction, and we found that out with our plants and garden hoses, and he was very good at that. And he then would grab, if you were walking with a towel towards the kennels, he'd grab it and play tug of war. And a lady once came to the kennels and she was holding a baby outside and the shawl was draped. And he thought it was tug of war, and as he ran to grab the shawl, at the last second I screamed no. And had he pulled that shawl, the lady was standing on concrete. I fear to think what the newspapers would have said, not that the dog accidentally pulled it out of her hands, you know, bull breed attacks child. That's all the media would have done. So please never play tug of war. Do not rev them up. You see the people with the Bull Terriers go, come on, come on, come on, come on, and they act like, you know, hoons, absolutely, and yobbos. So it's a breed with dignity, and they should be treated with dignity, although they will fart in the car on the way home from the show where you've got to stop and get out and wait for 5 minutes before you can continue going home. I mean, when I say dignity, it's selective dignity. Do not, mainly do not breed from successive things. Okay, if you've got 4 generations of crack mouths and you've got a dog with 2 or 3 incisors that have crossed over, please don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If that animal is absolutely knockout everywhere else, just find a mate for it that is going to correct that problem. But please don't do that crazy thing a lot of people do, and judges do. I mean, I've seen judges put up a dog that looked like E.T. run over by a truck because it had a perfect bite, and standing behind it is something you would kill to own with 2 crossed over teeth, and they'll dump it second. So, you know, don't let a very, very minor fault stop you from doing your mating. Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie Watkiss, Westbul Bull Terriers, Western Australia. Thank you very, very much. The interview was done by Strydom from South Africa.
Go.
Yeah, you got